All right. Call to order the September 12th Sustainability Commission. And we will do roll call. Give me a second here. Getting organized on dialing in. This is the first time I've dialed in, so give me a minute.
Somebody's on a phone.
We'll keep that until Pam reaches out. I'm not sure if you're
Hey, Rose, while David gets settled, is it possible to promote Colin to be a panelist by chance?
Yep. Promoted.
So I might advocate for, since David is online and he won't necessarily hear who's actually talking. I think if when someone speaks or you want to get David's attention to say something, we might just do the quick raise of the hand just so that we can know who's waiting to speak. David, if that works for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's a little hard to run a meeting from afar. It's fine to be a participant, but running it is a little more challenging. So hopefully that will allow for you to manage the meeting process.
Yeah, thank you. Especially since I have not even joined as a member on the Zoom call yet. So
well, it seems to be working fine.
All right. I'm almost there. I apologize. All right. All right. So we will do roll call. Pam Miller.
Looks like Pam is dialing in. Pam, can you hear us? Are you able to join via Zoom?
Oh, allowed to talk. Okay, here we go. I just allowed her to talk. I just asked to unmute. Let's see if she responds.
Pam, can you hear us online?
All right.
Okay, we'll circle back.
Jared Frank.
Present. Oh, she figured out how to turn her phone on.
Paul Quinn.
Paul has an excused absence tonight.
All right. Nick Garson.
Here.
Hey, Nick. Steve Christensen.
Here.
That'll probably me right here.
Hey, Tim. And Brian Lee.
Here.
All right. We will do the land acknowledgement statement. All right. We acknowledge that we are on indigenous land of Coast of Salish peoples. We have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land. We have lived and continue to live here since immemorial. All right. We will do approval of the agenda. Any issues with the agenda? All right. Hearing none, we will call the agenda approved by common consent and approval of the meeting minutes. Any comment? All right. Hearing none, we'll call the meeting minutes approved by common consent as well. All right. And since I'm not in the room, Rose, you said we had no online commenters reserved for this meeting. Is there anybody in the room?
We do have some folks in the room. We have 2 public comments tonight. Looks like Mary Richter.
Sure.
Hi, my name's Mary Richter. I've been in Sammamish 24 years, and I did email in something. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to attend, and I can't stay, but I just wanted to present. We had become a tree city, I thought, just been updated by Rose, but we are going to be a tree city soon. We're doing the application for it, and I know that most of the other people that are a tree city, they have some sort of sign where they enter. So this is just one from Duval. They actually put the number of years. I don't think that's so important. And I think the second part is also it. So I've submitted it. A lot of people put in where you enter the city, but we have like 5 entrances. So I don't know if you want to do it by City Hall, but you're the communications people. So that would be good. And then Duval, just since I was there, they also have one, and this is more of a DEIB for equity and inclusion. It's a welcome sign, and it says, "We are building an inclusive community. All are welcome here," with the city of Duval. So just while you're planning for signs, I thought this might be okay to do. And then on the text that I sent, it also spoken in June on trees. Over the years, because I go to a lot of meetings, I've heard that there are about $300,000 or $500,000 that have been paid in tree fines where something is done wrong or developers pay. That money just goes to the general fund, which always seems like, you know, if you're doing something with trees, maybe it should get back to that. So I'm hoping, since it's budget season and actually the city manager's attending, maybe that could be considered for where those could go so they could give back. Also in the past, people have said, well, there's no place to replant trees. It's in the code, but there's nothing defined. The park said they probably had too many trees for theirs, but there's native growth protection easements, and I'd spoken to that a few meetings. And then I know Director David Kyle of Community Development had said that would be a good place to plant trees. So I think something like that would work, or really anywhere that they could be accepted if they can't be put back on the site where they were taken from or damaged from. And then just to let you know, the critical areas code, that ordinance update is coming, and it's been going along. And with critical areas, you have geologically hazardous areas, which are landslide hazards, steep slope hazards, and erosion hazards, and also seismic or geologic hazards. And those are really places you're not supposed to be building. So if you are building, you want to retain the trees as much as you can, because you can't a lot of times plant them back after you do it. And if you recognize steep slopes, for instance, and they're properly identified, they're identified through the process, and you protect them, according to David Pyle, for the last couple of years, you're supposed to save 100% of the trees on those. So if you're identifying critical areas of steep slopes and landslide, you save 100% of the trees. And then the erosion code is also special. It's not quite as stringent because landslide is more risky, but you'll save 50% of the trees. And then I think the regular emergency tree ordinance from 2014, because it really hasn't been updated, it saves 25% in town center and 35% of regular trees. So anyway, I think it's really important that you look at all those. So I just wanted to put forth this again. And if you could look at doing the signage, that would be cool. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And we also have Paula in the room.
Okay, if I stand.
Of course.
That's okay. All right. I prefer to stand rather than sit. My name is Paula Harper Christensen. Steve and I have lived in the same house for 37 years in Sammamish, raised a big family. They're all gone with families of their own. We have 9 grandchildren, and we love Sammamish, and we want to stay, and we want to continue our work for our community toward a more sustainable city. So I want to say thank you, each of you, for serving on this commission. And I also, we have lofty goals as a city, and I want you to know you are not alone. There are lots of helpers out there. I'm involved in many activist groups, social justice groups, environmental groups. And when we need help educating the public, there would be a lot of people that would be available to serve, to help. So just and the ambassadors at the high school, the climate ambassadors at the high school. I wanted to talk to you tonight about, well, there's 4 initiatives that will be on our ballot, and they're all bad initiatives. This is the we are calling them the BAT initiatives from many of the environmentalist groups, Physicians for Social Responsibility, firefighters. There is one in particular that impacts sustainability, and that is an effort to repeal the Climate Commitment Act for Washington State. The impact would be devastating, and there are lots of us out right now canvassing, knocking on doors. Typically in an election season, I canvass 400 to 500 doors. We have the troops out right now trying to inform people about the dangers, the risks of 2117. This would repeal, again, the Climate Commitment Act we worked so hard to get passed. It was passed in 2021. So I brought information about the Climate Commitment Act, and it would be a threat to our air, our land, and our water, which is what you all are trying to protect. It's a health risk to adults and children. The incidence of asthma in children are way up because of our smoky air. And if you've had a child with asthma, you know how unsettling it is when they struggle with breathing. So my last ask tonight, and I don't know how I'm doing on my 3 minutes.
10 seconds.
Okay, Saturday at 10 o'clock at Beaver Lake Park near the climbing structure, we are gathering people to go out and drop literature like this at doors and talk to people. It's not exactly a canvas. You don't have to knock on the door, but you will have addresses to hang literature on the door handle. Steve helps me. He handles the app on his phone, Minivan, that tells you where to go. And I go to the doors and talk to people. So join us, Paula. Join us, 10 o'clock, Beaver Lake Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment tonight.
Okay. All right, and then we've got, I believe, Ryan and Colin from Puget Sound Energy to go over grid capacity and clean energy requirements. We have Ryan and Colin.
Great, thanks, David. Let me share my screen and then we'll do some introductions. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us out. My name is Ryan Lambert, and I'm the manager of electric system planning here at Puget Sound Energy. In my role, I oversee the planned investments in our electric grid to address capacity, reliability, safety, and wildfire mitigation needs. I've been in the role for a couple of years, and I've been at PSC for a little over 13 years. Had various roles over my career, so I don't want to bore you, but probably the most pertinent is just that I was in energy efficiency for 5 years to start. And I'll kick it over to Colin to let him introduce himself.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Colin O'Brien. I'm the supervisor of our strategic system planning team within the electric system planning organization. My team is responsible for planning the long-term needs of the electric system, so that involves understanding how load is growing, where we're going to need more infrastructure, and how to best plan for the future needs of our customers. I've been at PSC for about 8 years, all within the planning organization, and I've done many different jobs within the group, so I know a lot about the reliability and how to best plan for the future and meet the needs of customers.
So our plan today is to do a safety moment. We're going to talk about the delivery system and our overall planning process. And we're going to then turn it over to Colin. He's going to talk about the capacity system for Sammamish specifically and what we're seeing. After today, you should know more about our planning processes at PSC and what we're seeing in terms of load in both the winter and summer in Sammamish. We hope you leave today with an assurance that we're monitoring the system and we're going to build out capacity as we see needs. However, there's always a two-way street here. So our ask for you as members of your communities to partner with us. We need your help along the way too. So if you can help participate in our customer-facing programs or encourage your community to do so, that'll go a long way. So we have energy efficiency programs, we have demand response programs that helps lower the need on the system. And then when we do build infrastructure, if you could advocate for the permitting, that would be great. So with that said, At PSC, safety is very much important, and so we start every meeting with a safety moment. So for today, we thought we'd do ladder safety. Some important things to know when using a step ladder, whether it's removing leaves from your gutter or hanging up Christmas lights. Just make sure you follow the manufacturer instructions and ladder labels. Face the ladder, face the ladder when climbing up and down. Make sure you keep slippery materials away from the ladder. Use a barricade if you happen to be in a highly trafficked area. Only put ladders on a stable, level surface. Always make sure you maintain 3 points of contact. I know it's tough sometimes as you're bringing things up and down, but it's an important thing to do. And something very near to PSC's heart is make sure you check for and avoid power lines. So when we talk about the electric delivery system, it's kind of helpful to see an overall visual of everything we touch. So on the generation side, we have generators with wind turbines that then connect to our transmission system. Everything from the generation to the start of the transmission system, basically from the transmission system to the customer is what we own within planning. So as energy is delivered through the transmission system, it gets brought to the substation. From there, the voltage gets stepped down, and then it goes into our distribution system where we'll serve offices, houses, your very own house with its smart meter and electric vehicle. And there's always communication that's happening throughout, especially nowadays, to make sure it's as efficient and as reliable as possible. When we look at the future of the grid, there's a few things we're seeing. Ideally, and hopefully with your help too, we have more energy efficient buildings as well as houses. We're starting to see more community solar and commercial solar, and also electric buses and vehicles in general. There's been a large increase in the amount of EV adoption. And with all that, we also have increased connectivity. So one nice thing is that now more than ever, we can make smarter decisions and integrate the technology more efficiently. And then we leverage data analytics to help support that. When we look at planning as a whole, we have a framework here at PSC. We call it the Delivery System Planning Operating Model. It's pretty simple, but basically there's different triggers that will cause a need for us to take a look at the system. It could be anywhere from a safety trigger to a customer capacity request to transportation electrification, you name it. For the sake of today, it might be just as simple as just a large load coming on board. Let's say Sammamish is adopting a bunch of electric vehicles. With that information, we evaluate the needs on the system. We typically look at what is the current loading as well as what is our projected load in the next 5 to 10 years. And then from there, we figure out solutions. There's the one path where we can put the infrastructure in place, which is a good way to go, but it's not always optimal. But we also like to look at ways we can partner with our customers too, because that can be more cost effective at times. So as I mentioned earlier, if you want to participate in energy efficiency programs or demand response, that could be a better cost alternative as long as we have time. Once we create solutions, we evaluate it, we put in a mixture and figure out what's the best project for the particular area of need. We optimize that project. We then go forth and complete the project, and then we make sure as we execute that, we manage the performance throughout. So that's the way we think about delivery system planning as a whole. And then conceptually, this is what we see in terms of capacity needs. So in terms of load, we continue to see load requests, whether it's like, as I mentioned, new EVs coming on board, or it's a new business in your community or a new development. There's load requests that come in. We look at the current load. This drives load up. And so we have a natural need to be able to serve that load. And so how we serve that need is with solutions. And that could be with its customer partnerships, or it could be building infrastructure. I'll take a pause there and see if there's any initial questions. And if not, I'll hand it over to Colin. Okay.
Hi, this is Nick Arson. Could you go back a slide?
Yeah, sure.
Load requests. How do you evaluate population increases as well? I mean, sure, there'll be demand as more EVs are adopted, but I think a greater demand on the system might be, for example, I mean, the population in Sammamish has increased significantly in the last 20 years. So I assume that's part of your planning process as well.
It is. Yep. So we do look at overall, like we have a load forecast team. They look at general like economic factors, as well as like new technologies and what we're seeing. And then they even give it to us they give us an updated load forecast at the county level. And we're currently working with a new tool to help us with better geospatial analysis as well, trying to figure out from the county level down, based off like parcel, based off growth, what we're seeing there. Honestly, one of the biggest things that we see is just customer load requests coming in. So that's like the new developments. As they come in, we take a look at that and make sure we factor that into our analysis as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on your next slide.
Yep.
You have in the middle bar there, you've got the bottom bullet is decarbonization. Is that for your generation or?
Great question. And for the sake of this conversation, what we'll refer to it is when people are doing fuel switching within their homes or businesses. So going from gas, let's say gas furnaces, to electric heat pumps. The benefit of electric heat pumps is it gives you both AC and the heating, but there is an additional load growth that gets put on the system as a result of that.
Okay, so that's from the user side, not the producer side.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, so when we think about the delivery system, we're thinking downstream of generation, and so that's the big driver is on the user side. Mm-hmm.
Hey Ryan, Tim here. Could be just a chart thing, but why is the arrow in solutions pointing down? Does that mean you're getting less energy with solutions, or I'm confused by that?
It's meant to be depictional in terms of like we see the load goes up, but with solutions it drives the need down. So maybe it's like load/need is probably the better way to look at it. Yeah, like load requests put pressure, load growth, these things put pressure on the system, and so solutions help relieve the system of that pressure.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I'll hand it over to Colin.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, good outline. So now we're going to see how those planning practices and the specifics of the distribution system up to transmission are applied specifically in the city of Sammamish. So as you could probably tell here, this figure at the right, you got to use your imagination a little bit, but you can see the Sammamish area. If you look close enough, you can see the outline of the lake there on the left side of the figure. And then generally that thoroughfare on the right side is Redmond Falls City Road. So that kind of encompasses that Sammamish area and the feeders that serve it. Now, I will note these colors that are shown don't indicate anything around loading or needs or any sort of capability. They're only shown in different colors to depict different feeders from substations. But I did want to show this just to indicate how interconnected our distribution grid is. All of our feeders connect to different feeders, and they allow flexibility and switching within our system that provides our ability to system operators and for our planning group to meet the needs of our customers effectively. We do that through a load flow study process in a software that we call Synergy. So that's where this image is taken right out of our Synergy software. And in there, we do really complex load flow simulations to identify where we may have deficiencies or needs, as Ryan mentioned, in our planning process within the system. So, like he talked about, we look at capacity, we look at reliability, we look at resiliency, we look at a lot of different factors and how each of those may result in needs for each of these specific feeders that then go out to feed customers within the distribution system. You can see here we note that we forecast up to 10 years. That's utilizing those other information that Ryan mentioned, our corporate load forecast, known customer loads, any other sort of known growth within the system from electrification to electric vehicle growth, things like that. So we do a robust look pretty far into the future to identify where those needs might exist. Go to the next slide there, Ryan. Yeah, so and now this next figure goes up from the distribution into that substation scope. And here we see it a little more geographically located within the map, and you can see how those substations are spread out throughout the community. We study each of these substations using loads applied to those specific substations to see when they might surpass their capability to serve that load. And again, we use that kind of 10-year time frame to indicate when we might need to do something on the system to add capacity or to improve the ability to serve the load in one way or another. I did want to note, we do have 5 projects planned within the Sammamish area for the next 3 years. It's primarily focused on improving reliability within the community, utilizing some of that improved data and communication that Ryan talked about with the modern grid to really allow us to automatically switch when there is an outage and to restore power quicker than we would be able to otherwise. So it really takes into account how we can actually tangibly use that data, use that improved communication that the modern grid allows in a way to help customers within the Sammamish community. And then, yeah, sure.
Real quick, Tim, on the other side, but you've mentioned a couple times, I'm just, I think, ignorant to this, but what is a customer application? I can't recall ever applying to anything from any power supply in my life. Is that like new build? Like, what does that mean?
It's all new customers. So whenever there's a new commercial building, a new residential plat, or a new multifamily residential building, they will apply for that load to PSE. And then it goes through our planning process to ensure we can effectively, efficiently, and safely deliver load to that customer. So every customer, from a brand new house up to a new refinery or a new high rise in downtown Bellevue, all need to apply through our system for that load. So that's what we call our customer applications.
Got it. Thanks.
Sure. And really, those customer applications are the key to us planning effectively. So, the more we know, the better decisions we can make. So it's really important for us, as communities or as individual customers are considering things like fuel switching, like Ryan mentioned, or electric vehicle adoption, or any type of these loads that may result in significant increased load. The earlier we know about it and the more details we have, the better we can plan as a company to meet those effectively. And then for our next slide, we'll go one step up. So we hit distribution, substation, and now this shows how our substations are fed from our transmission system, which is kind of that main backbone of the electric grid. It goes from generation down to our transmission system, which is responsible for distributing energy throughout kind of our entire service territory. So our three of our substations that primarily serve the Sammamish area, it's the Holly Plateau and Pine Lake, are fed from our single 115 kV transmission line. And then we have Klahani over there in the southeast a little bit that is fed from a separate transmission line that's more runs along the eastern edge of Sammamish. What we show here in our figures are the 5-year forecasted load of each of those substations. So as you'll remember, we do have the ability to switch load between these substations with all those feeder ties that I showed before, but this does show, based on what we call our N-0 or normal state, what we forecast the loading to be. You can see Pine Lake substation PIN there is getting up close to that dotted line. I would suspect that in the next, within the 5 to 10 year timeframe, we may start to surpass that line. And that's when we will trigger the need to go implement a project, like Ryan mentioned, through our planning process. So it's a very robust and a very intricate process in which we identify those needs and then analyze different solutions. So I just wanted to note here, we do have all of our substations in the Sammamish area are performing well. The known load growth and the forecasted growth can be accommodated within the 5-year plus time frame. And this winter forecast specifically, I think, shows our ability to meet certain sustainability goals if that includes things like fuel switching. So if we had more electric heating, we actually have more ability to accommodate load in the winter than in the summer due to the way electrical equipment operates. You can load equipment higher in the winter because of the ambient temperature. I won't get too far into the details and the engineering on that, don't worry. But just know we do have a little more capacity in the winter to accommodate some of that load. So overall, like Ryan mentioned, what you should take from this is the system's performing well. We monitor it very closely. We're constantly identifying when substations or when the transmission line or when individual distribution lines may surpass those limits, those dotted lines for each of those individual systems, and we will plan projects accordingly. We will make sure that we communicate with our stakeholders, being you all, the city of Sammamish, community leaders, community members. Whenever we know we're going to do something, we try to get that communicate as soon as possible so we can make sure to have that input, that feedback, and make sure that we implement projects that meet the needs and also take into account the desires of the community.
Hey, Colin, this is Nick Arson. I don't own an electric vehicle yet. There are a lot of them on the plateau. I think we talked about there may be more Teslas in the Sammamish area than other places in King County. But what's the advantage to an EV owner? Do your rates fluctuate such that if you were to charge a vehicle overnight, you would actually pay less per watt than during the day? Is that a benefit to EV owners?
That's a good question, Ryan.
Yeah, I was going to hop in.
Sure.
Right now, I believe we have a pilot time of use rate schedule, but most residential customers, there is not a price signal as far as when you charge at this point in time. That said, we do have demand response events, and you can enroll in some of our demand response programs. And when there is an event, if you do lower your usage, there's a benefit to be had. But this is kind of new territory for us, to tell you the truth. We've been very blessed with a lot of capacity, a lot of energy in general. So we haven't had time of use rates for residential customers, but we're starting to get into that realm, at least piloting it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Your ordinate on these two charts, the unit is, I just did some reading on that a couple of days ago. Is that millions of volt amperes?
It's MV, yeah. It's basically a million volt amperes.
Wouldn't that be a watt?
It's similar to a watt. So the way electricity works is you have real power and reactive power that combines to be what we call our
okay.
Active power. So you can think of it pretty much the same as a watt. Yeah. So an MVA is fairly synonymous with a MW or a megawatt.
Okay. And the green line on your chart, is that the big high voltage transmission line that's in the east side of the city?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Colin, I had a question. One of our concerns as we are putting out our goals for the city of Sammamish around our climate action plan, we have things like reduce greenhouse gas by 50% by 2030, which is only 5.5 years from now, 96% by 2050. So in your forecasted demand, I mean, city of Sammamish is doing it, Kirkland is doing it, Issaquah is doing it, Redmond. If in particular for the city of Sammamish, in that forecasted growth, if we hit our target of reducing, like if we had 50% of our community now move off of greenhouse gas by 2030 and went electric, is that part of your forecasted growth? Because that's what the city of Sammamish, Redmond, Issaquah are pushing for. And, part of our challenge was understanding your capacity to, hey, if we have these targets out there, we're communicating these to our residents that these are our targets that we're going after. The next question was, okay, if we hit those targets and we get people to move off gas, 50% reduction in 5.5 years, can Puget Sound Energy even meet that need in one community like Sammamish? But if Issaquah and Redmond and Kirkland all do it, is that built into your forecast? And then the other part of what we're pushing, and all cities are pushing for this, is an EV adoption. And trying to get almost to 100% of EV adoption, or close to it by 2050. So, and you're already at 80 to 100% in your forecast model. And then what does that look like for Pine Lake or Klahanie if you do add that those goals and we hit those markers and the residents really get on board? Is that something that do you have to build out another substation? And where do those costs get translated to? Is that something that is, Puget Sound Energy, King County? Is that, City of Sammamish and our residents? Is that rolled into rates? How does that all work?
Yeah, David, great question. I mean, as you know, PSC serves a very broad service territory from Lyndon, Washington, up near the Canadian border down to southern Thurston County, almost to Centralia. So we are working with all these different cities to understand what are your goals in your community, what are your plans, how are you going to meet those? So, we've been meeting with the Kirklands, the Redmonds, all of these stakeholders to better understand. And like Ryan mentioned, we're still figuring this out too. It's very new for us, the EV adoption. What exactly is that going to look like when it hits the grid? Will everyone charge at the same time? Will there be staggered charging? What other sort of solutions or rates for customers do we need to implement in order to effectively accommodate that load? We're absolutely figuring that out right now as we go. As for the planning process, I would say we trust our process. It will likely require some sort of infrastructure improvement. As you talk about added population, like someone mentioned earlier, as we talk about a significant EV growth, even with time of use rates or some sort of other alternative solution, we do see the load growing on the system, and that is included in our forecast scenarios. So we likely will need some sort of infrastructure improvement. Now, our process is a robust consideration of every type of alternative that we have available to us that meets our needs of being safe, effective, and reliable. So we will consider green energy solutions. We will consider substation expansions, which is something that is likely to be a cost-effective way to meet capacity needs. We will also consider new substations as needed throughout our service territory. And we do that analysis to make sure what we're doing, our solution that we propose or that we go to build, is the most cost-effective that meets the needs identified, as a way to not burden the ratepayers any more than necessary to meet the needs that have been laid out there. So I know a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but I would say that the summary is that we are aware of it, we are forecasting it, we're running different scenarios, and it will likely require increased infrastructure and a partnership with you in Sammamish, with the city of Redmond, with all these stakeholders to best understand how we can meet these needs and honestly meet them very quickly, because 2030 is going to be here before we know it, and 2050 probably not too far behind. So definitely it's front of mind for us. We're running it through our planning studies to best understand how we can meet that growth in a way that does not overburden ratepayers and meets the needs of the community.
Yeah, and just to add on really quick, David, I did take a look briefly at the climate action plan ahead of time. And it does look like part of the emission reduction is attributed to our electric system, which makes total sense, because when you look at our generation mix, it's going to change substantially, which will naturally lead to greenhouse gas emissions within the community that's outside the delivery system. So, for example, like we're getting out of coal at the end of 2025. So naturally, our emissions will be reduced, and then the whole carbon emissions within the Sammamish area will be reduced as a result. We also have some targets to be net zero by the end of 2030. I think you saw that before with John Minetti's presentation as well. And then carbon neutral by 2030, and then completely out of carbon by the end of 2025 or 2045. So there's, at least in terms of the generation mix, I think that helps to support it. The other thing I'll add, and Colin hit on this a little bit too, was just if customers are going to switch from gas heat to electric heat pumps, like, or whatever it might be within Sammamish, there is headroom within the winter profile that we're seeing. And to add to Colin's points, yeah, like if we see the needs, we definitely forecast it. We definitely look at, we're seeing EVs by zip code level specifically. We layer that in and see what we can do to help build out capacity.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. One of the big things when I first read the Climate Action Plan, 88% of our greenhouse gases are from residential. And if we're going to cut that in half, you're talking gas fireplaces, gas stoves, gas heaters, gas furnaces. And so if you're taking, a 50% of all those appliances now are going to be electric in house, or you get halfway there, say 25%, right? A reduction, and 25% of that 88% of our greenhouse gases, because that's where most of the greenhouse gas comes from, is from our natural gases. And so if we're moving that many houses off of gas with that many of appliances, that was kind of our concern about, is that calculated in that forecast demand? And it sounds like you guys do have a very robust calculation. And as we get more aggressive as a community, whether it's King County or the state or city by city, yeah, I'm sure you guys are updating your forecast model to say, look, wow, if these guys hit these targets that are in all of their climate action plans, we got to get more aggressive with understanding, our typical growth pattern is going to change a little bit. It's not now just by population, because typically before, yep, you had, a house would have multiple gas sources. Well, now if houses, there are no gas sources, that changes that forecast model a little bit. And so as we kind of, because this is a new commission for the city of Sammamish, so we're kind of getting our feet under this. The Climate Action Plan was kind of built out. And so as we kind of understood that, we just had some concerns with, wow, we're putting these dates out there of 2030 and 2050. Can the infrastructure in Puget Sound Energy even meet that if we got there? And what are we communicating to our residents and setting expectations? And so we just wanted to make sure that we got so the big concern was, hey, trust that you guys, know what you're doing, but do you know what we're doing? Do you know that we're making commitments to our residents that, we want you guys to move all this stuff, and making sure on the back end, we're communicating with you. So that, and then if there's issues with the build out, the distribution, the generation, or the purchasing of all that, that's kind of where we were trying to get an understanding, because we're making these commitments to our residents of, hey, if you guys push this, the energy will be there, it'll be green, and everything will be great. And so as we're getting understanding ourselves of the Climate Action Plan and communicating that out to our residents, but I trust again that you guys have your forecast models built and are adjusting along the way as these communities get more aggressive.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have forecast models. We forecast every year, and then on top of that, we look at real time, like what was our winter peak, what was our summer peaks every year. So, like, if you are making progress, please look at how that performs against the forecast, and make sure we adjust accordingly. So, yeah.
All right, thank you.
I have a question about comparing your winter and summer loads. Just looking at your current peak load for I'm assuming that's Pine Lake, and the other one, the PLA, I don't know what that's standing for, but the summer, the Pine Lake load is slightly higher than the PLA load, but in the winter it's reversed. Now, does that mean more people in the Pine Lake area have air conditioning or something? Do you guys think about it in that sense?
Yeah. Great question. That very well could be the case. We don't go down to each individual customer the differences, but it's a good observation and likely has been that way for many years. And it is most likely probably due to AC adoption in those residential customers at Pine Lake. It could also be that Pine Lake has more of a residential service area compared to Plateau, whereas Plateau serves more of that commercial kind of commercial core there in Sammamish. So that could very well be a driver as well. But we do, like, you know, we look at the differences between winter and summer and our different abilities to serve load in winter and summer every year, and reevaluate the system every 6 months when we get those new peaks on the system to better understand, you know, where those what's changing and where those limitations may be. So, you know, let's say Plateau in a couple of years has a lot of AC adoption, and now in the summer that one is higher than Pine Lake. We will know that because we'll be watching it grow, and then we can plan a project accordingly to address those capacity needs.
One more question before we move on. The boundaries of the city of Sammamish are relatively arbitrary, right? I mean, they're lines on a map kind of deal. What prevents us from load sharing with places in Issaquah or Redmond and vice versa? So when I look at this and if this looks good, maybe Issaquah is like way over going to start taking power. So there really isn't enough load. Like, why is this? Why are you looking at just Sammamish like we look at Sammamish? Like, it feels like from your point of view, it should just be arbitrary where the city lines are.
I would say it's an interesting question. I would say generally it is a little arbitrary. You know, like our circuits don't care what the address is that they serve. They don't care what the city is when they serve the energy. They just come from the substation and go to the customer. Many of our substations serve more than one city. So, you know, Klahani, I think, you know, absolutely serves some customers within Sammamish, but it absolutely serves some customers within the city of Issaquah. It has circuits that span both of those communities. You know, we focused on this little subset here today just as an example, but yeah, you know, your circuits in Sammamish tied to Issaquah, tied to Redmond up kind of in the north, and that allows load sharing between those cities and more operational flexibility. So, you know, even though Redmond may be growing, we may need to do a new substation or substation expansion in Redmond that then has an additional feeder that can just hit the edge of Sammamish and provide you all with a little more flexibility as well. So it can be a little bit of a, you know, a win-win.
Okay. So you're looking at it big picture. You've just focused on Sammamish because we are Sammamish. So these lines probably match-ish as we go around to our neighborhood cities. So it's not as if this is painting the rosy picture, but Redmond's in trouble. So really this is incorrect. They're all kind of in the same range of distance between actual load and load limit.
Correct. Yeah. So we you know, look at each of our substations individually, and you know, some are going to have forecasts that are over that limit. Some are going to be way under. It all just depends on the types of customers, how many customers it serves. But you know, we do look at it holistically. So you know, when we look at the system, we're not necessarily saying let's review Sammamish. We're reviewing the entire system as a whole and identifying where those major concerns are from a system standpoint.
Yeah, I think this just helps with making it more visually appealing, because honestly, we look at it more like this, and that's not as exciting for you all. So there you go.
Great, thanks.
I would be remiss. This is Matt Larson. I'm local government affairs with PSC. I would be remiss if I didn't add, David, I thought your questions were great. I think one thing that I would want the Sustainability Commission or the council to consider too is, you know, we're equally concerned with communities leaning into a clean energy transition, excuse me. One of the potential threats or impediments of continuing to succeed and move forward is the more aggressive and more successful communities doing that transition, the more pressure on the system or upgrades to the grid, as Colin described. In other words, he talked about expanding the substation. In some cases, it's maybe just expanding means not necessarily growing the size, but maybe adding a second bank or circuit and distribution line or feeder lines in it. But it becomes a little more controversial, perhaps, if we're doing a new substation. Where in town do you do that? I served on a council for 4 years. I was a mayor for 20 years or 16 years, so I'm not a stranger to NIMBYism. And everybody's excited about stuff until it lands in your backyard, right? So we definitely have concerns about our communities willing to also, you know, step up and partner with us to be nimble and more efficient about, improving the infrastructure, improving that permitting, going through that process. It's not uncommon for in the past to take 4 to 6 or 8 years or more to sometimes do those upgrades, and the speed with which the clean transition is going to take place. We're very much in a new world in that regard. So wanted to raise that concern. So we definitely are going to depend on the communities in which we're serving to meet us and be partners in solving that problem, and recognize that those are challenges for them too, in locating those improvements and so forth.
All right, thank you. Ryan and Colin, was that is that the end of your presentation?
That is, yeah. We just had the last slide, just had like questions kind of thing. So if you have any more questions, happy to take them. But otherwise, that concludes our presentation.
Yeah. Does anybody else in the room have any follow-up questions about the Puget Sound Energy Plan? All right, Ryan and Colin, I appreciate the time and the information and the dialogue. It's it's very informative and helpful for us as we then communicate our commitments back to our residents. So thank you.
Yeah, likewise, appreciate the conversation. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye.
All right. Next up is sustainability outreach, and I believe Angie is doing a presentation. Hi, Angie.
Hi. My name is Angie. I started with the city in May. I'm the communications manager. Rose asked me to give a little bit of background. Before this, I was with the city of SeaTac for 3 years as their digital media strategist. Majority of my job was creating social media content, marketing, and advertising campaigns. And then before that, I was with WashDOT, one of their Twitter personalities and public information officers. So I do have kind of an extensive background in social media and digital communications. So hopefully that will aid our conversation today. Rose and I have kind of brainstormed some information. I know she's shared this document with you guys. If you've had a chance to look through it, awesome. If you haven't, we'll kind of do a little bit of an overview, but we were brainstorming, how can we communicate some of these topics and some of these ways that people can get involved or make changes or shifts in their life. We know that's really important to you guys, is to encourage the community to kind of change some patterns or behaviors. So this document is really important. We know that, I think we just discussed this a little bit too, that our home and personal vehicle emissions are kind of where we see a lot of greenhouse gases, and maybe how we can encourage people to change what they're doing. So we have been creating content around that already this year. We'll be continuing to do that. We're doing a big push digitally. That is just how most people consume content nowadays. We do have articles in a printed magazine or newsletter that happen every issue that Rose works on. Those topics have been kind of decided for next year that you can see on this newsletter overview. I don't think it's going to be anything that's surprising, but we've got obviously some push about heat pumps and transit, stormwater, some really big topics up there as well. We want to make sure that we're sharing messages consistently. So we've got a couple of social media pushes every month. There's some flexibility with what those topics are and how they look. So it might be video, it might be graphics, it might just be text and a photo. We know that how people consume information, they consume it better when we change up what we do. And we want people to look at it. We want people to share it. We want people to engage with it. What engagement means when I'm using that term is liking, sharing, commenting. So we're going to do some more of that pushing. I know that we have some metrics that you can look at. I think there was a thirst for some data. And Rose has been tracking what she's been doing in person at her tabling events and how many people she's been talking to. And you can see all that data here. There's also data that we track as a city through our social media channels about how many people are looking at our content and engaging with our content. We have a couple of years worth of data from that in this document as well. When I say social media, we're active on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which is now known as X, and Nextdoor. Those are our primary channels. And so that's where that data is being pulled through. If you're on any of those, or if you're on all of those, hopefully you know that they function a little bit differently. So that's why it's important to consider some flexibility with how we present content to make sure that it fits the platform and what the platform is trying to push at people. So, yes.
You don't have YouTube up there, but you are on YouTube. So I follow you or subscribe to this.
We do. I do not run that account because it's mostly primarily used for our meetings. And so it's not necessarily a tool that we're regularly creating content like this for. So we do.
Is there a reason for that? That YouTube is excluded from creating this?
No, she's one of one in our communications department, and there's only so much time that she has to be able to do that. So I think for right now, that content is generally not created, but set up by Rich, who does that as part of the publication of the meetings themselves. I think YouTube is a whole different level, and generally, what Angie is doing is doesn't really focus. That's not really what YouTube is for. It might be in the future, but for right now, she's got her plate pretty full trying to capture the pieces that she's working on.
Okay.
I would like to make a brief plug for the Earth Day video that you put together.
Thank you. And you might have seen, but also on the City of Sammamish YouTube channel, we have all of the event videos, July 4th, Earth Day, the other one, 25th anniversary, a couple of the other event videos. So we do post those on there. And then we also post all of the planning commission meetings, city council meetings and whatnot on there as well after the broadcast. So that's basically what we're using it for currently.
Okay, thanks.
Want to make sure we have a chance to answer questions on any of the outreach communications plan that's written, as well as the events and metrics that we're providing before we get into an activity that we'll be leading.
Yeah, I mean, so I love the data, thanks. If you go down to the second table you were just showing, curious what's missing here is the tile lake impressions, how many times you posted, I guess, right? Like to be able to understand like what happened between 2021 and 2023. If we've lost 1 million impressions, I assume we're posting less, but I can't tell from that.
Sure,
it's a great ad.
Yeah, it's a number that I probably can get access to. It's just not a number that I have right now.
Yeah, and I know you're new and like this, a lot of them for you, but like these are the questions that pop into my mind immediately. Like, why would engagement was amazing in 2022? Like, we should do more of what we were doing in 2022, whatever that was. So
can I offer?
These are questions I've been.
So in 2022, I'll tell you what happened. I lost my communications team, and we didn't have any footprint on social media, and so everything was driven through. We didn't have. We did not have the newsletter for the bulk of 2022.
Okay.
And so as a result, those drove up somewhat, but if you look at the engagement rates overall, you can see what happens when the newsletter goes back out and hits every household. It's the only thing that we have that goes direct, that actually gets in front of everybody, every household in the city. Otherwise, the engagement rate, you see what it drops to once we do that. So that's kind of what the difference is. 2021, we were still in COVID. So people were tending to be more geared a little bit more to setting on their devices. 2022, we lost a newsletter for the bulk of the year. And then 2023, you can see where we are. We're about static on our engagement rates because the newsletter is going out 5 or 6 times a year.
Sorry. So the newsletter, is that going out? That's going out digitally as well? Is that what how I understand this? Because
it's on you can download it off the website as well as it's mailed out.
It is mailed, yeah. I know I get it. But so I'm looking at the start there.
Yeah.
The title is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Nextdoor.
Yes.
So the newsletter is going.
We're not sending it out the way. What I'm saying is that when people get the newsletter,
that actually drives engagement to your.
Well, they don't necessarily feel the need to. Does that make sense? When they're getting things through the newsletter, then they're not necessarily going and engaging. But that's my draw out of.
Fascinating.
Because I look at that and you can make that direct correlate. You literally block out our engagement rates with when the newsletter is there and when it is not.
I would agree that I get all my information through the newsletter.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. This is one of the things that's interesting about our community at the moment. The 18 to 35 demographic virtually doesn't exist here. It doesn't. We have very, very few. Are you 18 yet?
No.
Not yet.
See? There isn't a lot of housing stock, and there isn't a lot of activity that is reflective of those that are in that age range, particularly if they don't have kids. So we have kids that are in a household that have parents that are older, and then we have people that are my age and up, and we're all like, ooh, paper. And that's the reality is, you know, unless there's a specific thing where you're like, oh, I really need to find that out. Driving people to our website is, the engagement rate on the social media is way better than the hits we get on our website.
And I think you'll see some changes too as your community grows and shifts. So, you know, I'm a millennial, I'm considered a millennial. As you see more of those people end up moving here, whether it's to have a family, start a family, or whatever, they might end up, as we see in some other cities, navigating toward the digital means. So I come from a city in CTEP, we used to have a magazine. We got rid of it because our community turned young enough that no one was reading it. So we went primarily digital. So you never know what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years, but this is just kind of a reality now. And I think having multiple options for people is helpful because digital media can be more responsive than our printed magazine because obviously it responds in real time. But I think you also have more creative control and options with what we do on social media. So we know people are going to want to watch something that entertains them and hopefully educates them at the same time.
I think, you know, my daughter is 19 and gives me constant feedback about anytime I mention something about Facebook, she just laughs and she's like, yeah, no, I don't know about, I don't post on it. I don't have an account. I don't do anything on it. She is well beyond that. She doesn't pay any attention to X either.
So how many times does she say, okay, boomer to you?
Well, you know, she knows better than that, but I think, but I think in terms of where our demographic is and how people receive their information. One of my colleagues, who shall not be named, still receives a daily newspaper, which I even laugh about because it's so rare now. I get it delivered at home. That, you know, as we shift, people really are, if you look at our engagements with residents, if you look at where we have those big numbers, you can point to the bigger events that we have. The farmers markets, the Earth Days. My very much sense after being here now for about 3.5 years is everyone's looking for a reason to get out and engage with their neighbors now that COVID is over, and that people are they generally are responsive in that way. I think so. We are continuing to try to blanket everything to make sure that we are covering all the bases. But overall, our online engagement rates are, I mean, you'll laugh, but there are people like my wife who's like, oh, I don't know what's going on in your city because, you know, you're always in meetings and you talk to me about it. And so she follows the city on social media. But if you look at, we can go in and look at who actually follows the city, the number's not that big. People will go on and look at stuff, but they don't necessarily follow.
That's true.
So this is where the newsletter, believe it or not, is our #1 way that we communicate out to the residents.
Do people comment on like social media posts? Is there any like deeper engagement with like commenters? I mean, I'm assuming not, just because, you know, that's such a.
It depends on what it is. Topics vary. And so I think that there's some decent conversations that happen. And if somebody's asking legitimate questions, I'll go in and answer them or point them to where they can find information. I think we'll see some more of that. Things get interesting during an election year. People feel very empowered to comment on anything and everything. So that's kind of, it just really does depend.
Okay, makes sense. You made a comment, and I think we've heard it here before, that the newsletter, I'm going to paraphrase, but it works, right? That's the engagement. Other than it getting mailed out, how do you know it's working? because it's paper, right? So you don't know who's reading that. Nick aside. How do you know?
Brought my copy here.
I brought my guy too.
Yeah.
But like, how do we like? Yes, it reaches everybody because the mailman delivers it.
No, it's a fair question.
Like, how do you know it's success?
We don't necessarily accept that. If you ask people, how did you find out about this or that or the other? The majority of the way people answer is, I saw it in the newsletter. And when we didn't have it, I will tell you, we got a lot of engagement in form of email to me saying, when are we getting the newsletter back? We did for a time period, we were doing like weekly blast emails through our email delivery system, and that drove about 0 people to the website. Right. So when I say email, I'm like, that's my daughter's like I'm so frustrated that the school forces me to have an email address. I have to check email. Like nobody uses email. And it's like, sure, but the world hasn't caught up to that. You know, we still mail paper stuff. When you email things in the same way with paper, you can choose to ignore it. So then the question is, well, how do we actually communicate with people? And that was our constant challenge. Council continues to challenge us to, and what we've come to is events that draw people in with things that are of interest to them is where we really hear back and we ask, how do you receive information? And the bulk of what we get is the newsletter.
Can you create a banner that you can put up on those spots on 228? Would that be another way to communicate? I mean, you've got banners you put up for various holidays and like 4th on the Plateau, and
yeah, we rent space on our own because we rent that out. So we do rent space for our bigger events. Ironically, during the summer you couldn't even see them because the trees had grown up enough that the branches were sort of, if you're coming southbound, you couldn't read them at all. But yeah, we do rent. I mean, we do for our bigger events. We rent our own space, if you will. But then we also make it available for, you know, community and business that want to put something up. It's available for that. Again, that one I honestly see. I have no idea the viability of those.
Well, I was just thinking of a banner like, think about buying a heat pump or something. You know,
we could wrap your vehicles.
I will say, just really quick, adding in here, the Energy Smart East Side program that the city is part of through the other cities has a really robust marketing and outreach program administration aspect of that partnership. So we recently had video ads and news ads running, as well as wraps on some of the rapid ride buses going on the east side. So if you've been around Bellevue, maybe if you were riding a bus, you wouldn't have seen it because it's on the back of the bus. But through some of our partnerships and programs, we do have some of that more creative, targeted outreach going on, especially for heat pumps.
Can we reuse some of that for our social media for free?
Yeah.
Like out of the box, right?
Yeah, we actually have some videos queued up. They created some really great, like, here's why you should buy a heat pump. There's like a cute dog, a family that's really happy on their couch with the heat pump. So we've got a couple things coming up in the next few months. It did take some time to work with our marketing consultant to get all of that material, but it'll be rolling out with the bus ads and everything in the next couple months.
I could see a banner that says, sign up for the Eastside Climate Challenge.
Yeah.
I went online today and there's 911 people signed up. Total East Side. That's pretty small fraction of the population.
Well, again, I think you're highlighting the challenge that we collectively have, that we're asking this group for help with. These are great ideas. I think they're certainly worth looking at. I think one of the things that we try to be really purposeful about is trying to wrap it around specific events so that it's not just a one-off. And so what is the right time frame to do something like that around which event where people can come engage with some of you so that they can ask questions and learn more information. Because again, that person to person, if you again look at the engagement numbers, that's where we get our biggest bang for the buck, is person to person, truly.
Are these numbers? So now this is the person. So help me understand this chart.
Yeah, so I put this together so I can help explain it. So essentially you've got each of the months of the year. And then just to kind of illustrate the same way that we put together a newsletter article plan for 2025, this is a look back into 2024. So all of the different things that were pushed out through that newsletter to every home. And then you have the number of sustainability related social posts. What we're aiming for moving forward into 2025 and 2026 is a minimum of 2 a month, which I'm happy to say we've hit almost every month of 2024. Right. And then obviously when you have some of those summer months, some of those summer events, there's going to be more posting associated with that. And then moving further to the right, you have the number of outreach events that I and commission members attended that month, as well as the number of residents that we spoke with at each of those events. So it's kind of 3 separate metrics that we're looking at here, but it's just by month across the board.
So the outreach events and the engagement with residents go together.
Yes, and
the social media posts is independent.
And it doesn't show up quite so well there, but it's gray, yellow, and then blue.
so you'll laugh about this, but Rosa had the same when I first saw this. I had the same thing where I was like tracking straight across, and I was like, "Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense." Right. And so she's like, "No, they're separate ones." So yeah, okay. we aim for the color differentiation. It doesn't quite
translate on screen.
Yeah, I get it. We deal with it with work all the time too. Is it possible in the future to get the engagement by month next to the sustainability posts to get a sense of like?
So the social posts are not related to the engagements. The engagements are physical interactions that we have.
Yes, no, agreed. Not asking you to move that column over, asking you to add a column that says we did the one post, it got 15 likes or whatever we did in January. And then in July we did 4 and we ended up with 700 likes, or, you know, to kind of give that sense of what's working and what's not.
So I will defer to Angie on this. I think one of the concerns with tracking every single post engagement is that if we start doing it for sustainability, then it kind of opens the door to human services and cards. And there's only one answer
compared to those other ones. You know, are we happy or sad with these numbers? Because I don't know.
So that's why we're looking at the overall social media engagement, because tracking every individual post is not feasible with the current level of staffing that we have. And while it would give us some good insight, I think what we're trying to do is continue to push outreach and think about what topics are going to be the most important.
And if you're curious, I mean, Facebook will show you how many people liked something, how many people commented on it. It won't show you as a person just viewing it necessarily number of impressions, but you can kind of gauge if somebody actually liked and wanted to engage with that content. Rose did a carpool reel that has over 2,000 views on Instagram, and you can easily see how many people viewed that.
But you all have to have Instagram accounts.
Correct.
See?
Correct. So I guess to answer your questions, we're kind of tracking that anecdotally, but it's not something that we are currently tracking with every single post and looking back, especially because sometimes something will get reboosted, or someone will find it and share it, and then all of a sudden you have more. And so how often do you look back at that engagement with social posts? Would you do it every week? Would you do it every month? Would you do a yearly look back? And so some of those considerations are where it gets a little bit complicated.
As a representative of the entire Generation X, I spend my entire day on a computer. That's the last thing I want to do in my free time is look at another screen, right?
Yeah.
Others feel the same way. But that's why I like the newsletter, because you just pick it up, sit on the couch, and take a look at it.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, I want things to perform well, but there's also a line of, yes, you want something to perform well, but also even if it doesn't, if it's still important to share that information, we should still share that information, you know? So that is important.
But you need to plan for the future. As Scott mentioned, the demographics will change on the plateau, so the city needs to adjust on how its media campaign is going to evolve, right?
Yeah, I'll agree with all that, and it tells you what is interesting to right?
Yes.
Like if home efficiency like really stood out, people are really interested in that. That's something we should talk about more, right?
Yeah,
or figure out how to talk about it again so people engage and get in the habit of it. If it fails, not that we don't talk about it again, but try again. Or like videos do really well,
or we can align
whatever.
You know, part of our job is to help the city prioritize the aspects of the climate action plan, and maybe the interest will help direct the priorities, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. And
but I want to be a little cautious about that, because in some measure, then we are making calls about what's more important or others based on the feedback that we're getting, not about where we want people to go. And the example I will use is we are doing a ton of work on pushing out information about the budget and the budget process. And we're posting all kinds of stuff on all social media channels. And I guarantee you, when we get to the budget, about nobody is going to be coming in and weighing in, because that is my experience in many years in government, is that you can, I mean, we can go out and dance around with, wear Tyvek suits to talk about the budget and run through neighborhoods shouting, and we still won't get people to show up about it.
Unless the city decides they're going to issue a bond, and then people get interested.
Right. Except for but I mean, if you were just saying like what's going to get interest online, we wouldn't be doing that. We would be doing anything but, right? So I think we just have to be a little bit careful about getting too wrapped up in, like Rose was saying, around what works on social media. I do think we should be tracking things that perform better. I would be much more interested in not the content of it, but what the platform is and what works better than others.
That's the other style that's presented.
That I think is worth tracking, and we can work on that.
Totally.
I'm a little bit cautious about putting metrics out about that. I think that's more helpful for about how we continue to try to communicate, Nick, to your point about how we continue to grow and pivot as things change, recognizing that the people that are going to make the decisions about, for instance, changing out into it and putting in a heat pump are most of the people sitting in the room. No offense to the youth board member, but it's probably your parents that would be forking out the cash to do that, not sort of folks that are lower, earlier on in the age bracket, if you will. So I think that's that piece where we have to figure out who is, it's great to, like, my kids are all about this stuff. I don't have to convince them. They're not the ones making any sort of financial decisions about the home that we own and what we're investing in and changing and that kind of stuff. They can come gripe at us that we haven't done X or Y or Z. And I'm like, great. Is your job going to help pay for that? And
but they're critical to the 2030, 2050 plan, right? So
totally. And so how do we address the now while building for the future? And that is where you all are going to be really helpful. So we'll continue to track what performs well, but I want to be careful about not the topic performing well, more about the medium and how we do it. And Angie is an idea machine about this stuff. And she's truly fantastic and has great ideas. Some will work, some won't. And I think that's what we're going to try to put stuff out there. We might ask you all at some point in time to do some sort of video, and maybe we already have. Forgive me, Angie, if I forgot about it, but to help us with that. Hey, I'm not, I'm a resident, I'm a commission member. This stuff is important. Help us with this, whatever it is, right? I think that's where we can really start to move the needle to get at all of the age ranges, because our youth are the ones that are going to be left holding the bag. And I think, getting that engagement and understanding what's going to help move that needle. I mean, again, they're already way ahead of us on this stuff.
Yeah, maybe is it Angie?
Yeah.
We're going to have a strategic discussion, I believe, at the end of the year. What I've mentioned in prior meetings is that I get questions from people about what's going on with the city and the climate action plan. We probably all do. Yeah, I'm not quite sure we're all synced up on the responses. So it might be good for us to develop some talking points and key messages around what we're doing. Yeah.
And I think, honestly, Nick, as part of that, if you're going to do that sort of year-end sort of planning session, I think that's a great thing for you all to work out in some measure about thinking about where are those priority pieces, because part of this is what are you going to be doing next year, and then you can talk about what it is that we're doing and why. I think that's great.
Yeah, and those are things that I can definitely help with. And I think he made a key point of like some things will work and some things don't. What we know from our social media companies is there's this word algorithm. If you're not familiar with it, Facebook, Twitter, they love to throw it out. They won't really be specific about how they change it, but we all know it changes when something that used to perform well suddenly doesn't perform well. So every platform is kind of managed differently. and it shifts and it goes through kind of changes and ebbs and flows. So it's important for us to kind of just be open to having to try new things and shift focus and gears. Right now, Instagram pushes reels because they want to be TikTok essentially. And so and it's short form. Long form video does not perform well on most of these social media websites because people just have 15 seconds of an attention span. So you have to kind of go with that as we create things.
15-second attention span?
Yeah.
Yikes.
But this is for the same reason why we don't do long form in the newsletter.
Yeah, people haven't been reading long form news in forever.
The newsletter is geared around trying to lead you to something else, or it's a notification of an event and what it is and that kind of stuff. But it is really trying to give you a snapshot, and hopefully people, saying like, hey, go to the website to learn more about this. Do we know how that actually works? Not really. We don't have a good way to gauge that. Right. But that is how right now that's our best way of actually reaching out to folks.
I think that's a perfect segue into our next activity. I do want to say quick plug for our social media channels. If you're not already following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., one of the best things you can do as just an initial first step as commissioners and representatives of your community is following those accounts and then sharing any of our posts onto your own personal channels to reach that additional audience that we might not be getting. Brian, I'm looking at you specifically. So that's great. And then also, as we're talking about, what topics are folks going to be interested in? We don't have the opportunity, or we have not yet had the opportunity to really, do focus groups with the community or look at some of those social media metrics and how they're performing. But you are a perfect group of representatives of your community. You understand at a high level the climate action plan, where our focus needs to be to reach those climate action plan goals. And so we'd like to hear from you. We've got a little dot exercise. So I've basically put together, we had provided a whole long list of different topics for each of the climate action plan sections. And I've taken some of the most impactful. Obviously, there's still so many for each of the sections. I'm going to give each of you 5 green dots, and I'd love if you could pick 5 separate quadrants to put those dots in, what you feel is the most important and impactful action as it relates to the climate action plan and your task of changing hearts and minds. And then we'll take that into consideration as we're writing the twice monthly or more social media posts.
Does David have that in email form?
I did email this to both David and Pam. So if you could check your email, and then it should just be a matrix. Feel free to either highlight or add an asterisk or bold, however you would like to identify the 5 boxes that you feel are most impactful and important as it relates to our climate action plan goals. I've got 3 different ways we can do this. I have 2 that you can share on your side of the table. I also have a couple up on the wall, so that way you don't get too crowded there. They're 2 pages, so there's 1.1, 2.1. So you might have to get a little cozy here. And then if you have,
so we're gonna work on these together.
If you have any questions, feel free to ask. This can be kind of a debate and a collaborative activity. Okay. Ultimately, you as an individual commissioner have your 5 dots, but you can collaborate on where you want those dots to be if you would like.
Right.
If you feel really strongly, you absolutely can, but it would be great since we have a lot of.
Well, I mean, according to the climate action, basically what we got to get.
So Rose, just to clarify, Brian and I are going to put our own dots on.
We're
going to share the score.
Yeah, and then I just did this for access, but I'll be providing that.
That's drop all 5 there. That's
right. Let's take all 15, right?
Yeah, all 15.
So to be clear, heat pumps 101 is kind of an idea of, what is a heat pump, and then home electrification and energy efficient appliances could also include heat pumps, but yeah, that would be the focus on heat pumps. So you totally interpreted that correctly.
Well, yeah, but home electrification also means getting rid of your gas water heater and your gas stove.
Yeah, so that that's, you know, homemade general.
Gas barbecue.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the one I don't know. I can get rid of.
Yeah.
If there's anything you don't know what it is, let me know.
Do you have a natural gas one?
Switch is on.
So the switch is on is similar to Energy Smart East Side, but instead of being just focused on heat pumps, it provides information on all electrification. So it has rebates for electric vehicles, heat pump water heaters, and smart appliances. And it is not just specific to the East Side. It gives you all of the state and federal incentives as well. So it's a great website to use to see how much money you can get back if you're thinking about going electric.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is Climate Change 101 and Greenhouse Gases 101 about?
So in my mind, Climate Change 101 is educating folks on climate change as the big picture. What does that mean for the environment and the planet? And greenhouse gases are, what are greenhouse gases and how does that tie into the emissions, for example, transportation?
I would say that greenhouse gases could be a subset of climate change.
Okay. Absolutely, it could, but remember that our messaging is 15 seconds or very short. Yeah. We're not able to do as long forms. So that's why it's separated out a little bit.
And the bus routes 269 and 554, is that like making them more robust?
That's educating folks that we have buses that this is all education and outreach. Yeah, so this will be specifically, you know, as we're looking at developing social media content.
We got to get Mr. Denier to come to that.
Are the buses going to reach the new train?
Yes, the 260
terminals, like where you'll get off a bus and get on a train.
That's the goal. I mean, it's designed to go there. I think my personal frustration at the moment is it's supposed to take a bit of a detour to the Bear Creek Park and Ride after it comes down the hill before it goes back to the station in Marymore, but it will absolutely go to the station in Marymore.
Awesome.
David and Pam, if you have a chance to send in yours, you know, in the next 5-ish minutes, I can just put dots for you physically here in the room. If not, if you could just get it to me by end of day tomorrow, that would be great. And I'll be compiling all this information.
All right. I'm just figuring out how to draw on the iPad.
Sounds good. You can also send me an email if you want with your top 5, whatever works best.
You done? I'm gonna get some diversity of thought on this one.
Yeah, remember we'll be combining these two, so I already see some overlaps.
You guys didn't do heat pumps at all?
You guys got it covered.
That's how it works.
It's basically gonna wind up being everything.
We did make a really funny heat pump like Instagram story, and this will only pertain to certain generations, but essentially it had a cutout of Paris Hilton, who's like, that's hot, and then it has like a heat pump next to her, with like a link to learn more. So that was fun.
You've been trying to get creative.
They're rebooting that show, so it was kind of good time.
Ever stand next to the outdoor condenser unit when you're air conditioning? She'll really get hot.
Yeah, I have a heat pump in my townhouse. It came with it, so I can't take credit for changing my carbon footprint. But yes, it's also very loud.
Did everyone have? Do we need a couple more minutes, or we're looking good here? I also want to check in. Pam, are you still with us? Are you able to hear us or speak?
Water didn't cut it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Perfect. Okay. Great.
They only gave us 5 dots.
I was gonna say if we had 10, it would be so much easier.
You had 15.
Yeah.
You were supposed to collaborate like that. Supposed to.
Okay. Great. Thank you all very much. This is going to be really helpful for Angie and I as we're continuing our outreach planning. And then next, we wanted to discuss, I think I sent a couple emails about this during our August break, but there was some interest and some support for a pilot program run by the commission to increase and expand our outreach to the community. So we'd like to just kind of have a discussion and then hopefully start the planning process. This is not, you know, end all be all of this, but just kind of get some initial ideas and see about brainstorming. Pam had sent in some ideas, and then we also wanted to hear from you all. Pam, did you want me to read those that you had sent?
Yeah, I mean, I think the group has covered, you know, a lot of the social media, you know, topic, but if you want to just read it off, that would be great.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yes, please go ahead and read what I sent. You know, we've had a pretty long conversation about social media, but go for it.
Perfect. Okay, so I will ask this first question. I'll read Pam's and then we can continue into the discussion. First question, are there other community events that the commission should be attending for in-person outreach? Recognizing that us as a city government and city employees are aware of city sponsored events and events that are hosted by the city, and then we hear about other events through our partners, but we recognize that there are some that we maybe are not aware of or only hear about at the very last minute, whether that's neighborhood block parties, church events, other community gatherings, nonprofit organizations that you may or may not be involved in. So I just wanted to make a quick plug between now and the end of the year. If you know of any events, please share them.
so one I've mentioned before, and I think, Angie, this ties into engagement. We've talked about homeowners associations as a good way to convey messaging. And maybe this is another thing we put in the parking lot for our end of the year discussion. My homeowners meeting is typically in the spring, and I would be happy to give a presentation to my group. But again, I think that's something we as a commission need to work on. And can we prepare some messaging that any of us or other HOA leadership members might be able to use for community discussion engagement? Yeah.
That's great.
I know with my family, it's all sports all the time, right? So there's like Little League field or Little League Day at East Sammamish State Park, or with ESD. I guess I don't know what those letters actually stand for. But yeah, like there's all kinds of that stuff. My daughter's in dance. They have things down there where like it feels like getting a tent. I don't know if it would be hard or not, but it feels like popping up something and showing up to the sporting events is.
Yeah, same as Angie said, people's attention span is 15 seconds. So like, what's our elevator speech as we're putting this stuff together, right?
Might 30 seconds. It does shift depending on the age of the person.
The climate action plan is 100 plus pages, right? So how do we distill that down to 15 to 30 seconds? So that'll be part of our challenge to try to sort out.
Maybe we do more than one message. We do a bunch of short ones and you pick the one that's most appropriate for whatever the situation is.
Yeah. And I will say you have a very helpful sustainable Sammamish guide right there that is so helpful. If you have a question, someone's asking you about rain barrels, you can pull up that little part and you can give them information or send them to the link that we have online. Pam had also mentioned individual HOAs. I think, Pam, I hope I'm not telling you in this moment, but you mentioned that your HOA board might be open to a presentation earlier in 2025. So as a pilot program for the commission, maybe that looks like each of you picking one HOA that you are aware of and connected to that you can go give that spiel. And if that happens once in the year, great. Maybe if you all collectively agree, that can happen once a month. It's really the cadence that you all are comfortable with and you all agree on, so that this is a collective effort from all members of the commission.
I have friends that live in smaller communities that like, condos as well as then in Trossachs, and I'm happy to talk to them about presenting to their HOA at some point. It'll be interesting to see what the reaction is from their board.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are other folks feeling about presenting to HOAs?
I wouldn't have a problem with it, but my HOA is only 35 homes. And maybe 10 residents attended. You got to meet once a year to be a registered HOA with the city. So it's not well attended. But having said that, there are minutes written and they're emailed to everybody in the community. And like all emails, I suspect maybe 12 people read the email.
You're describing a council meeting, Steve.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd be willing to do too.
I talk to my HOA, I just don't know how to get to any other HOA.
Yeah.
I've Heritage Hills, I don't even know what Hampton wants to do.
But the big one, I mean, you're in Klahanie, aren't you?
Yeah, in an apartment. So it's
they don't let you in the HOA?
No, sadly.
Yeah, but I maybe Klahanie is dealing with this here. I know my neighborhood is as well. We have a lot of trees that are dying and need to be replaced, and our HOA doesn't really know what the options are for replacement. That's in the in our urban forest management plan, there's suggested species that thrive well in this area that an HOA could consider. So like if we have topics like that in our HOA meetings, aspects of the climate action plan could be really helpful, right?
Yeah.
I know they did a big tree removal project in Klahani because the roots were undermining the sidewalks. I mean, this was a while ago, but I don't know what they used to replace it. But
that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think, all the HOAs are different. People care about different things, but for my OH, it's about projects. Like we replaced fencing last year. Now we're thinking about trees. And so how do we tie that stuff to what this commission is trying to do to provide information? Yeah.
I agree. I think it's great. Like within our own communities, we should engage with the HOA first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what my HOA is doing. But although I know our meeting like this week, so I won't be able to meet for another year.
Yeah. Or your neighbors doing remodel projects. We'll have you consider not using gas appliances, converting to high efficiency electric. I don't know if a lot of people are thinking about that.
Right. But yeah.
So it sounds like we've got two folks who have an HOA identified that you could potentially speak to. Any ideas or recommendations for the rest of the commission on how they can get their foot in the door? Or...
Two HOAs.
Well, we've all got neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I walk around my neighborhood and I go, oh, yeah, they got a heat pump. I don't see their outdoor unit. Maybe they don't have one. So I'm identifying targets. So if you're on friendly terms with that individual, you might say stalking. Oh, by the way,
wandering through the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Go to checking your side yard to see if you have a heat pump.
Okay, so thank you for that initial feedback and brainstorming. My next question that we kind of have to help lead discussion is: are there other areas of opportunity outside of events or outside of social media? Where are some of these gaps that we're talking about? And can you as commissioners think about how you might be able to fill them, engage with your neighbors, whether that's going door to door, talking with the other parents at your soccer events, and if that can be a coordinated effort?
Well, like we were talking yesterday afternoon, what about Issaquah Farmers Market, Salmon Days? I think Redmond's got, I can't remember the name of their annual festival. I know it's outside of the city, but I'm betting you'll see a substantial number of Sammamish residents walk by. Mm-hmm. And the catch could be they'll see this tent with Sammamish on it. And I live there. What's going on? Mm. And walk over and engage with you.
Yeah.
How do we? So there's only what 5, 6, 7 of us, right? How do those citizens? That weird saying that. The resident that I forget her name that came in was like she had this network of activists apparently that she was talking about. Like, how do we engage people like that to help us? We don't scale. There's 8 of us that like I can walk with take me all year to walk around and I have a job and everything like everybody else. But how do we can go join her, I guess, but like how do we what do you guys know what of those organizations exist within Sammamish that we can leverage, or do we just email her?
I mean, I have some high level. Scott, did you?
There are not as many as you might think.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure there are, right? I'm sure it's a relatively small percentage, but it's going to be exponentially more than us.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is asking folks that are there groups that you're involved in that might be interested in this. I think obviously Steve knows because you can just look across the table at Paula and chat with her about
that. Got the app on the phone.
And then beyond that, I mean, it might we can ask council members if they know of other groups aside from the ones that are already participating about how to that are operating here that might be interested in doing that. But from the city's perspective, there aren't a lot of ones that I can immediately point to and say, oh, you should talk to them. because to my knowledge, a lot of them don't exist. I think the other place, and this is again is a different space. This is more of an outreach thing that the commission could do, but some of our religious organizations or big churches in town, stuff like that. If there's interest from those, it might be, or if you're involved in them specifically or directly, that's another place that you might be able to gain some traction in terms of getting out in the community. So really, those are where the big community congregational pieces are, as well as obviously the sort of school events, but that's only if your kid is in a school.
Yeah, school is the other one.
Here's an idea for consideration. Some of the more recent environmental remediation conferences I've attended, they've brought in like a filmmaker who has like a documentary about climate change. Some really good ones, and they're very well attended. And I know there would be a funding issue with the city, maybe through some of our grants. We're going to try to get. I saw that email about potential grant funding available, although it seems like it might not be tailored to our community. But that's an idea. If we could figure out, are there any local filmmakers, documentarians that have put together, a really interesting video or movie about climate change that the city could host, and that would be a draw for people to come in, meet the creator, the filmmaker, view the movie, and then the community has a discussion about climate change and sustainability in Sammamish.
This is ultimately your program,
right,
so I'd be curious to hear what other commissioners think as well.
I can see you.
I really like that idea. What if we did something? Yeah, I can do a little research around it, because I think that's a great idea. I attended the Bloomberg Green Festival that was held here in Seattle in July, and they had lots of filmmakers that were from pretty much around the country, and some pretty well-known folks. I'd be willing to go back and look at some of those and see who would be willing to participate. Is this something we can do at what's the name of the Expansion University, the college that's right across from City Hall? I always forget them.
Central Washington.
Yeah. Is there any way we can do some kind of a there?
I can see that a film being a kind of a hook to get people to come.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the short film, you can say, okay, now we've got several topics that if you're interested, we can discuss with you, and you'd have kind of breakout sessions.
Well, a lot of films are very, there's definitely a message, right? It's not hopeless, but things are changing. We have an opportunity to make a difference now. Here's how the city of Sammamish is trying to tackle this problem, and then have discussions, input. The commissioners that are represented can say, here's what we're working on as a commission. Angie could put a media campaign about movie night together, on the various platforms you talked about. I'm just trying to figure out, what's a draw that would bring people from the community in. In my experience, these types of films and documentaries are really interesting, and people like to attend those types of events. Sustainability movie night, something like that.
So Tim, this is kind of a random question, but is there somebody associated with Amazon that can help us get like a documentary that's been streamed on Prime?
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that question right now, but I could ask around. I know Prime Video is pretty separate from or insulated in terms of what I do, but that I can see.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. But yeah, it's
quick question. Something, Tim, you said piqued my curiosity. You were talking about how do we scale, right? And what about talking to the city council members about one of their campaign managers, because that's how they get their word out, right? Putting together a sustainable Sammamish campaign of group of volunteers that you can call upon and say, hey, we're doing our quarterly campaign. You guys have volunteered. Like, there's got to be somebody in the community that knows a lot of people and has put these together for a council members run in the city of Sammamish. Maybe we bring one of those in that would want to volunteer some of their time to help us put together a group of volunteers that when we do want to get a campaign out, we just hit that list like they do, for their constituents when they're running for office.
I love that idea. I think it makes total sense. I'm thinking, I know we've talked about this in the past, but like in my mind, so heat pumps are where it's at, right? The climate action plan says that's a big opportunity we need our residents to switch to. We've all talked in the past at various times, like we know we have some old neighborhoods where these things are going to be happening, right? Now is the time to get people thinking about it, because as soon as your heater breaks, it's too late because you're in an emergency. So can we leverage David's idea and say, let's get a network of activists somehow, right? And I totally agree with.
I prefer the term enthusiasts.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Engaged citizens.
Yes.
Engaged residents. And can we, like, you don't have to talk to anybody, right? Like they were saying, they were going to put these on the doors. Here's what a heat pump is, right? And get it in front of them. So like, oh, this is something to think about, right? Maybe they don't. But we've heard today that reading is what our citizens like. They like paper. This is a paper thing that's just there for them when they're ready to take a look at it. 10 seconds, then you throw in the garbage, but you have heat pumps on your mind.
Cycle.
Correct. Yeah. but like that seems like a great way, and I'll go knock on doors about that. I'll go hang these up. That's why I don't be a part of that community, but I can only do so many homes, and I couldn't even do my neighbor in the day, probably, let alone some large portion of that map up there on the wall. We have to do more than just the 8 of us. Or it's not going to work.
True. Okay, so wrapping up what I've heard, it sounds like we've got kind of 3 ideas put forward that we're going to revisit at our next meeting or a future meeting as the agenda allows. And this will be something that we are hoping to launch starting in 2025, do some planning between now and then roll out whatever you all decide on sooner if possible.
Can I add one more? We have Earth Day coming up in April.
Yes, yeah. So the same, you mean like just as a reminder for commissioners
to
attend?
No, I'm thinking let's go a little bigger this year. So like when you, Steve, and I were there, we kind of got overrun, and I don't think we had enough of us, or enough, the layout wasn't that conducive to talking to a lot of people. We're kind of one-on-one, but there were a lot of people at the booth. And so if we could add that as a 4th idea, how do we go a little bit bigger on Earth Day and make it more engaging? Yeah, you got little kids spinning a wheel and getting prizes and stuff, but the parents are really the ones we want to spend more time interacting with, right? Yeah.
Cool fire pit.
So some takeaway points I'd like you all to think about, and I'll send a follow-up email as well, but it sounds like we've got an idea for targeting HOAs as a commission, making some kind of commission engagement video that we can push out that is going to be basically a call to action for residents, and then targeting specific ages, so 20 years of neighborhoods to do a specific heat pump campaign. And then I think the Earth Day, that's something I'd like to do anyway. So I'm gonna take that feedback and I will run with that. And as April approaches, I will continue to engage you all. Arbor Day is another one that's on our list that we already kind of have in the works down the pipeline. So those 3 that I mentioned would be in addition and would be kind of commission owned rather than something that I'm already working on. So HOAs, video, or neighborhood specific outreach. Those are the 3 that we're going to revisit. If you have other ideas, obviously we can discuss those too, but I think narrowing it down from those 3 is really wonderful. And these have been some great ideas.
I will take it as an action. You all know where I'm going to be 10 o'clock Saturday morning.
Apple Cup?
Is it by a lake?
Yeah, it's by actually not. It's by the ball fields.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to use the last 10 minutes to discuss. I know there was some interest in an extended meeting. I think staff and leadership just wanted to get a little bit better of a gauge of what it is exactly you as a commissioner looking for from those added 2 hours that we discussed at one of the meetings between now and the end of the year. David, you and I had briefly spoken about this at the market yesterday. And so I just wanted to open the floor. You know, we're here to serve you all. If you have a good case for an extra 2 hours, we're all yours.
Yeah, and I'll kick it off, and then we can go around the table and just kind of hear from everybody. As I explained to you, and we've talked about it a couple of times, the Climate Action Plan is in itself is a very complex program. And you've got transportation, building, natural resources, water, waste, resiliency. We've been at this almost 8 months, and we haven't even touched some of those. We haven't talked about the 70% water diversion by 2030, the resiliency of designing and implementing resiliency planning. So we've read the document. I've got my opinions from my experience around where I think we should be focused in the next year and maybe the following year as far as priorities inside of this, because under each one of these areas is a whole complex list of things that we want the city and the residents to do. And so I've got my opinion, what I think we should be doing. The people in the room have their individual opinion. We don't know each other. I don't know what most of the other commissioners think about the document, because we talk about, when we landed here in our role, we were given a document that we didn't help create, and with an agenda already set for the year, right? And so we're just kind of clicking through. We vote on a couple of things, but I think at least for me and some of the other commissioners I've talked to, it would be good, because typically what you do with a brand new group like this in a business setting is you'd get together and you do some whiteboarding, and you talk about, hey, here's what I think is important and here's why. Because I have a perspective of why I think those things are important based on my kind of diverse background and all the diversity in the room. I think you guys picked a very diverse group of individuals. So I would actually like to hear why some of the other commissioners would think that one or other is more important than another. But we've never had that conversation, because we're always very tactful and almost being kind of just, Rose, you do a really good job of pushing us, just to keep moving forward. I don't feel like we've had a chance to understand the value of each of the commissioners that they bring to the table to help. What is their perspective? And then talk a little bit, have a chance to talk about, well, why do you think that? Oh, well, I've dealt with water, systems and collections, and here's why I think, we should highlight this more than something else. And so just being able to hear some of that experience that each of the commissioners bring and their perspectives of, why aren't we talking about the water, determine the water consumption baseline and things like that in our commission meeting? Well, it's because transportation and the buildings and energy use have been the number one priorities. But maybe somebody on the commission who has more experience with some of this stuff thinks we should start focusing more on some of the other key pieces of the Climate Action Plan that we haven't had, any discussion on over the last 8 months. And I'll just leave it as that. I think the city and the commission would be better off if we had a better working relationship and understanding of the value and diversity of each of the council or the commissioners.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the things I don't know if it needs to get, or I guess one of the things I would like to see out of a meeting like that, if we invested that time, is how can we snap more closely to the priorities of the council when it comes to this, right? Because to David's point, that is a huge document. There are a million things in there to do. We all have our ideas what the priorities are. We've all been told our priorities are important, but we don't get to set priority for the council. We don't get to set priority like what the city's going to do. I would like to have it kind of come the other way. Like, this is what the city thinks is important out of this. This is how we tackle this document. It's always from how this is concept. And like, here's, what do you guys think? I would love to hear more from like the city thinks this is the number one thing. Like maybe it's EVs and not heat pumps, or maybe it's this kind of water, or not that kind of water. So then we can focus on the things that matter, and we can start growing the boat more together versus like we think this is a really great idea, but we're not. But we've got this already planned out for the year, so we can't do that because we got to wait till 2026 or whatever it might be. Like I would like to hear some of that feedback so that we can take that and bounce it off what David was saying and say, how do we work together and really help move what's already sort of in the works and what's important going forward versus us trying to kind of create our own ideas, which is I feel like where we've been a lot as a commission of like, let's get started, but it's already started. We should just get in line, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with what David said. And I'm not advocating we have like a 4-hour meeting. I'm thinking we could do it in a 2-hour meeting, but there's no other agenda other than we're looking at the climate action plan. We're figuring out what are the 2025 priorities. And then that's how we build our agenda for 2025 in this end of the year meeting. Because I do agree what David said about water. I mean, I know it's not our top priority, but it's not something we should take advantage of. Or part of our water supply is contaminated. The Sammamish Plateau Water District is investing $20 million in water treatment. And so I think as a community, we need to be cognizant of that and then build conservation outreach into our program as well. Yes, energy is important, greenhouse gas reduction is important, but water is really important as well. And so all I'm saying is let's try to set as a group, let's set our agenda for 2025 and we do it in a year-end meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Is our agenda set for 2025?
Not yet. So we're going to see how things shake out with the budget and also council's priorities. Scott, do you have information on the timing of that?
Which part?
Both. I believe budget, we won't be in time for the October meeting, but maybe in the November meeting.
Oh, about the final piece of the budget?
Knowing what's funded, knowing what we are working on.
Yeah, we are presenting, or we're starting to present the total numbers of the budget will come on Tuesday. We'll start working through with the council in all 3 October meetings of different pieces of the budget, walking through the numbers and stuff like that. So by the 1st of October, we'll sort of have locked down what the numbers are for at least for my proposed budget to council. And then council gets to then pick and prod and decide if they agree or they want to do something different. So council is slated to take final action in November at the November 17th meeting. So we'll have by your October meeting, you'll have a pretty good sense of what is in there from a dollar perspective, but that's different than, quite frankly, in large measure about what this commission would be working on, because a lot of what you're doing isn't necessarily dollars based. Right. It's more, and I appreciate the conversation, David. I appreciate you bringing it up and sort of talking about what your expertise is, what you bring to the table. But then, Tim, to get to your piece a little bit, which is part of that whole thing is climate action plan is, I think someone said how many pages it is. Right?
Over 100, 120.
It's 120 pages. If you ask council members, they'll say the whole thing is important, which is to say that nothing's a priority because everything's a priority. So part of what right.
Yeah, nothing is a priority.
Right. So that part of where we are is we would love this group again to help us say, how do we take that, sift it down, figure out what is going to work in the near term that moves the needle, and then how do we get the word out about that?
This is the climate action plan right here. So
I mean, I've seen it. I just can't remember how many pages.
It's a lot. I would love to spend an entire meeting to David's point, sitting down and going through that and saying, because to me, these are the business lines, right? If I were to take this up and transpose it to my job. You have the business lines that are doing next things. They have goals. Which one's going to get you closest to the goal fastest now? And that's where we need to prioritize. And I would love to go through this with that lens with this group and be like, okay, water. Here's the things in water. Which ones should we? And if this council is looking to this commission for that kind of feedback, one, I don't think we've been giving it, but Well, we haven't had a chance. Like, I would love to be able to do
right,
that.
and I think this is part of the maturation of this whole process, right?
Yeah. Oh no, that's fine. I get it. Right. Like,
so I mean, that's why I appreciate the conversation and where this is going is. I think this is the sort of the marriage of now that we sort of all sort of found some solid ground, if you will. And it took a while, and it was always going to. So I'm clear about that. We're not behind. This has always been going to be one of those where we're like, oh wow, the mountain is high, and there's all kinds of things to get sidetracked by in that plan, right? And so some of this is really trying to help focus in where do we make the biggest impact, and then how do we start to get that out in the community. And quite frankly, part of it is to help us as well to say, hey, here's biggest impact, here are things that we can do, here's something that the city could do, here's something that we could do, and then we can take that and figure out, is that realistic, fundable, how do we work that? And that's that partnership moving forward. And that's where it'd be really helpful for council to then, we can bring council's goals. They're going to do another goal setting review retreat early in the year as well. And so, marrying up where they're trying to go, what they want us to get done with taking this plan and trying to implement it. Some of this is a little more forward looking. Some of these are super aspirational. Love to be able to get there. Some things have to be in place. I think you heard from PSC tonight. Some of those pieces are, we love all this. Guess what? We have all these other communities that are asking for the same thing. Mm-hmm. That's great. We support you. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. No, I agree with all that. In my day job, I've got to address public comments on environmental cleanup documentation, right? We've gotten feedback from members of the community, but I don't think we really acted on any of it. We've had people email in, come to meetings, say what they think is important to them related to the climate action plan, but I'm not sure we've really listed that out and kind of see how that matches up with the city council's objectives and this commission's objectives, right? Because those people that are trying to communicate with us might actually be enthusiasts that we can help with some of this stuff, right? So
having paid attention to the whole multi-year process that ensued going back to, 2021, 22, with Brightworks consultant and David Piles' work with them, and being part of that community action, whatever it was, committee, and listening to the city council. And one of the things David did, and I'm not going to suggest any of you do this because it's about a 3-week process. He's listed all the YouTube videos where this plan was discussed. And it's a long list. So if you've been to a city council meeting, they don't get over in a half hour. So if you went and watched all those videos, you'd know you'd see what I saw. But it's probably 30 hours of videos or so. There were council members that talked about water. There were council members that talked about garbage diversion into recycling instead of the landfill. Every one of these topics in that document was talked about. And the reason why they're all in that document is because there was a lot of pressure put on them from the city council to put it in there. So that's the sum of that document. I think the final document, the one he's got, is it's either the 7th or 8th version of the document. It went through that many revisions. So I'm kind of in agreement with David that we need to prioritize what's important. The resolution they passed that started this whole motioning process dealt with greenhouse gases. Didn't deal with water, didn't deal with trash. They just dealt with, and then all the other things got added in because they're a good idea. So should we put more emphasis on water than we put on greenhouse gases? Probably not, but we shouldn't forget water as in just concentrate on greenhouse gases. We need to bring it all along together. So I think we need to figure out as a group, what are these priorities? How much effort are we going to spend here, 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 and here? And maybe that's what needs to go forward to the city council. You're right. The document doesn't really divide up each one of the 5 categories into which one should be emphasized, which one shouldn't be. I think that's on us.
And when. That's the other piece. Some of these are like, there are different time horizons for all these different pieces. And even if I pivoted the entire budget, we threw it all at it, we're never going to get to everything. So I think, part of this again is, helping us sort of thread the needle a little bit about where are we going to get our biggest bang for the buck as we move forward. And I think that would be a great exercise. And I think we would find it really helpful and useful to hear from all of you, your collective discussions to David's point about your experiences and your knowledge and looking at the plan and saying, okay, because it's a plan, but it is not a implementation plan.
We could put a framework together for a 5-year implementation. We figure out what topics are prioritized and in what year. And then that would help with the budgeting process, and that would help us get to the goal of implementing this entire plan.
And also remember, it does have a 25-year time horizon. We don't have to be done with this until 2050.
Well, it's going to wind up being an iterative document as well. And so as we learn more and as we do updates and stuff like that, we'll come back and review the plan. So one of these pieces is, as we look at it, it's like, okay, what is going to work and what might not, and what do we maybe need to ask council to go back and review one of these pieces and say, hey, maybe we might need to take a fresh look at this. I think a 5-year plan in a 2-hour meeting, I'm going to tell you, Nick, is probably a little bit of a reach. But I like the idea.
We need a planning process.
Yeah, I like the idea for you all to sort of think about and block out, maybe to start with your group, to take a long view and then work your way back from there to help get centered around. Again, you all are volunteers. You're talking about trying to find other volunteers to help you. You have limited time outside of your day jobs and your families and stuff like that to come and do this stuff. And so how do we take all those pieces and be tactical enough to be successful without, because we can get way over our skis here really easily and plan out a whole bunch of stuff and then not be able to get to any of it because we get overwhelmed by the enormity of it. Yeah. So some part of that is, hey, look at all this great stuff we should be doing. All right, let's take another run at it and try to narrow, really winnow it down and say, because being focused here is the challenge. I'll be straight up honest about this. That plan has so much in it. Trying to stay focused, recognizing you're not going to get to everything. And really that's where this group will be incredibly helpful about how do we maintain that focus, move the needle while not losing sight of everything else. And then how do you transition from one focus to the next? Because again, if you try to do 3 or 4 things, 5 things at once, I think that is a possibility where you're going to feel very frustrated and there's not going to be a lot of success to get to actually getting out to people messages, things that resonate, that allow for change. And it's going to be really hard to measure that change. So how do we do things where we're like, yeah, we know, we find a way to figure out how we're moving the community needle as we invest actual dollars in things on the other side to say we're going to try to do this, that, or the other. I think this year, the initial approach around heat pumps and the heat pump program and dollars that go with that, that's amazing. That's for first year, that is huge, right? We have real dollars in the budget. We have people actually taking advantage of the program and we're actually moving it forward. That partnership, this is the other piece about this partnership with our other communities, with the groups that we're partnering with, fostering that, building on that, expanding the reach, maybe using some of those partners to come in with us to help out, to get to some of this stuff, recognizing that as this grows, hopefully you get more people interested. And then we can get more people to go out and do, whether it's presentations or otherwise, maybe it's a media packet that you can hand to an HOA and they can do it themselves. That might be something that this group decides is a good focal point. So I think all this is great. I think, you know, we're, like Rose was saying, we're happy to accommodate and to the extent needed facilitate to make sure that that's successful, and then you get something out of that that then you can work with, and Rose and the team can work with to build on the next year. Because I want to make sure that you all feel like you're making a difference. I think that's really important. We would very much like to be able to make a difference with you and as your partner in this. And so trying to find that path is it's a moving target, but I think, you know, this is a great start.
Well said.
Sorry, I've taken up a lot of time.
No,
I know.
Thank you.
Apologize, David.
No, thank you. I know you guys were trying to understand what we were looking for out of that, and I think, you know, we were also trying to figure out exactly what, because I think it is important, Rose, you talked about this, is understanding, okay, at the end of that 2 hours, what do we want it to look like, right? And then work back and facilitate a meeting around that outcome, you know. So I think that that was a good discussion.
We will discuss and follow up via email between now and the October meeting.
All right. Anything else? I think we're a little over. All right. With that, I'll call for adjournment. Thank you.